Section 42 of A History of the Inquisition of Spain, Volume 4. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Eric Björnsson. A History of the Inquisition of Spain, Volume 4, by Henry Charles LEA. Book 8, Chapter 9, Spheres of Action, Witchcraft. Part 5. Whether the pleasure-loving king organized the projected preaching crusade we do not know, but he was sufficiently impressed to promise that he would honor with his presence the coming auto de fe, which was fixed for November 7th. Something distracted his attention, and at the last moment it was announced that important affairs would prevent his attendance. The disappointed inquisitors, on November 1st, wrote to the Suprema expressing their regret and reporting that there would be 31 persons in the auto, besides a large number of persons whose trials were underway. Thus far 22 aquelarres had been discovered, and the accused were so numerous that the special favor of heaven would be necessary to overcome the evil. Accompanying this was a letter to the king, enclosing 2 of the sentences con meritos, to enlighten him as to the ravages of the devil among his subjects. This sect of witches, they said, was of old date in the Pyrenees, and had of late spread over the whole region. The inquisitors were devoting their lives to its suppression. They were fighting the devil at close quarters, and they hoped to excite the royal zeal to lend the Inquisition efficient support. Those letters bore the signature of Salazar as well as those of his colleagues. Great preparations had been made to render the auto impressive. Crowds assembled from a distance, and it was reckoned that in the processions there were 1,000 familiars and officials. 2 days were required for the solemnities, and on the second day, to finish the work between dawn and sunset, many of the sentences had to be curtailed for, as usual, they were con meritos, with full details of the abominations of the aquelarres and the crimes of the culprits. All the grotesque obscenities which the foul imaginations of the accused could invent to satisfy their prosecutors were given at length, and doubtless impressed the gaping multitudes with the horror and detestation desired. One novelty in the sensual delights of the aquelarre was that the feast was usually composed of decaying corpses, which the witches dug up and conveyed there, especially those of their kindred, so that the father sometimes ate the son and the son the father, and it was stated that male flesh had a higher flavor than female. There were also the usual stories of the destruction of harvests by means of powders, of sucking the blood of infants, of bringing sickness and death by poison so subtle that a single touch in a pretended caress would work its end. When the demon reproached them with slackness and evil-doing, 2 sisters, Maria Presona and Maria Ioanto, agreed to kill the son and the daughter of the other, aged 8 and 9, and they did so with the powders. It was natural that a population placing full credence in the existence of malignity, armed with these powders, should be merciless in the resolve for its extermination. Yet the auto, in its absolute outcome, could scarce be classed with the murderous exhibitions to which the Spaniard had grown accustomed. In all there were 53 culprits, of whom but 29 were witches of either sex. Of these there were 11 relaxed, 5 who had died in prison, in effigy with their bones, and 5 negativos who had not been induced to confess. There was but one relaxation of a buen confitente, Maria Zozaya, whose terrible confession overshot the mark, as it showed her to be a dogmatizer. Even under this excitement the Inquisition maintained its rule not to execute those who confessed and repented. Under any other jurisdiction the 18 who were reconciled would have been burnt, and of these apparently only 5 were scourged. Merciful as was this, the effect of the auto was to cause a revulsion of feeling among the more intelligent. When the local magistrates were proceeding as usual to arrest suspects, the alcaldes of the royal court of Navarre, early in 1611, interposed by arresting them in turn for exceeding their powers and prosecuted them to punishment. This incensed the Logroño tribunal, which on May 17th addressed an energetic protest to the viceroy. The action of the local authorities had been of the utmost service, not only in sending culprits to the Inquisition, but in leading to many spontaneous self-accusations. This had now all ceased, and those who had confessed were beginning to retract. The tribunal had relied upon the court for aid in exterminating this accursed race, and now it was protecting them. Possibly the tribunal may also have invoked the authority of the Suprema, but, if so, it can have found no sympathy, for there also had been a change of heart and a return to the old policy. On March 26th, it had ordered the publication of an Edict of Grace, which Salazar was deputed to carry with him on a visitation to the infected districts, and after some delay he started with it, May 22nd, on a mission destined to open his eyes and put a permanent end to the danger of witchcraft epidemics in Spain. To this a contribution of some weight, though by no means so influential as had been reckoned, was made by Pedro de Valencia, a disciple of Arias Montano, and one of the most learned men of his time. At the request of Inquisitor General Sandoval y Rojas, he composed an elaborate discourse on witchcraft, addressed to Sandoval under the date of April 20th. In this, after premising the great grief and compassion with which he had read the relations of the auto of the previous November, he proceeds to discuss three hypotheses. The first is rationalistic. There is no demon, the aquelarres are assemblages for sensual indulgence, to which the members go on foot, and the presiding demon is a man disguised. The second is illusion, produced by a pact with the demon, who gives to the witch an ointment throwing her into a stupor during which she imagines all that is related of the aquelarres, whence it follows that the evidence of the witch as to those whom she has seen there is not to be accepted. The destruction of cattle and harvests is the work of the demon, or may be accomplished by poisons. The third supposition, believed by the vulgar, in conformity with the evidence and confessions, is the most prodigious and horrible of all, and against this he brings his strongest arguments in full detail. Pedro does not express any positive conclusion of his own, but his reasoning all tends to support the second hypothesis, of stupor and illusion produced by the demonic ointment, and from this he deduces the result that witches are by no means innocent. They delight in the crimes which they believe themselves to commit, and desire to persevere in their apostasy from God and their servitude to the devil. Men sometimes become heretics through ignorance and mistaken zeal, but these seek the devil in all his hideousness for the purpose of partaking in foul and unhallowed pleasures. They merit any punishment that can be inflicted on them, for such rotten limbs should be lopped off, and the cancer be extirpated with fire and blood. Their conspiracies to kill and the crimes which they commit and the injuries inflicted on their neighbors, before and after these dreams, deserve all this and greater rigor. This virtual equalization of criminality in elusive and actual witchcraft was not likely to be of benefit to so-called witches, but there was wisdom in the caution which Pedro urged on judges to assure themselves of the reality of alleged crimes, and not, through preconceived views, to so direct their interrogatories as to lead ignorant, foolish, crazy, or demoniac persons, like the witnesses and the accused in these cases, to testify or to convince to extravagances, because they see that it is expected and hope to gain the favor of those holding the power of life or death. Similar stories were told of the early Christians, and in view of all this, and the utter legal insufficiency of the witnesses, the whole tissue of evidence and confessions vanishes into smoke. Amid all these deceits, the prudence of the judge should seek the true and the probable, rather than monstrous fictions, for if he desires to find the latter, he will be fully satisfied by the miserable lying women before him, disciples by their own confession, of the father of lies. The inconsistencies in this discourse suggest that probably Pedro had stronger conviction than he deemed it wise to express. It is possible that Inquisitor Salazar may have read the paper and have been somewhat influenced by it, when he started in May on the visitation which proved to be the turning point in the history of Spanish witchcraft. But we have seen that, in the consulta de fe of the previous June 10th, his attention had already been aroused by the contradictions and unsatisfactory character of the evidence on which the tribunal was accustomed to act, and when once his mind was directed to investigating the problems thus suggested, the close acquaintance with facts afforded by the visitation enabled him to reach conclusions vastly more definite than any which his predecessors ventured to form. He started, as we have seen, on May 22nd, 1611, with the Edict of Grace. His work was thoroughly conscientious, and he did not return until January 10th, 1612, after which he employed himself, until March 24th, in drawing up his report to the Suprema, which was accompanied with the original papers, amounting to more than 5,000 folios. It will be remembered that an Edict of Grace was published in 1610 with little or no result. In contrast with this, showing the effect of a different spirit in its administration, Salazar received 1,802 applicants, of whom 1,384 were children of from 12 to 14 years of age, and besides these there were 81 who revoked confessions previously made. All applicants for reconciliation made full confessions of misdeeds, after kindly warning of the obligation to tell the truth and the danger of committing perjury, and were promised to secrecy to relieve them of fear. The enormous mass of evidence thus collected Salazar carefully analyzed and presented under 4 heads: 1. The manner in which witches go to the aquelarre, remain and return. 2. The things they do and endure. 3. The external proofs of these things. 4. The evidence resulting for the punishment of the guilty. The first 2 of these present a curious medley of marvels, such as holding aquelarres in the sea without being wet, and the testimony of 3 women, that after intercourse with the demon, In a few hours they gave birth to large toads. But we need not dwell on these feats of imaginative invention. The importance of the report lies in the last two sections. End of section 42.